Ms. Baylor, will you please call roll?
Member Dalton?
Here.
Member Jones? Here. Member Rosen?
Here.
Vice Chair Wynn?
Here.
Chair Broadwater?
Here. Okay, we've handled oral communications. We'll go to consent items, minutes.
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve.
Show me abstaining on the minutes.
I better abstain on them, too.
You were there.
Last
May
week?
13th.
Oh, May 13th. Getting those minutes out a little late, aren't we? We have a second?
Yeah, go ahead and call for the vote.
Call for the vote.
Motion received 4 yes votes with Member Rosen abstaining.
Okay, we have a public hearing on midterm review and amendment of the 5-year implementation plan. Mr. Fertel.
Yes, I'd like Chet Yoshizaki to give the presentation on this item.
Chair Broadwaters, members of the agency, this evening's public hearing is for the purpose of reviewing the midterm review of the 5-year implementation plan of 2004-2005 or 2009. The report is provided to the members of the agency about 2 weeks ago, since it is a rather large document for you to review and look over the progress that has been made over the last 2.5 years. I would just be giving you a brief summary, since I know you've reviewed the report, and for the purpose of the public hearing, just mention some of the highlights contained in the report itself. Just as a point of reference and review, the 5-year implementation plan of 2004-2009 identified a number of projects that were on the planning boards or underway. Just to highlight a few, the Sheraton Hotel was in process, and as a result, later this month we anticipate an opening of that project. The Spring Hill Suites are now in conceptual phases of their planning, and hopefully will be breaking ground sometime this year or early next year. And we continue to focus on the Auto Center and various changes that have occurred the last couple of years there. We've not assisted directly most recently with some of the changes, but are anticipating some help by the agency as some of the dealers change out their lines. But it wasn't just the big projects we worked on. As you can see, Los Sanchez Restaurant and Greens Glass, 2 small businesses that were impacted by our projects, were successfully relocated and opened last year. And so those were some very good programs that we started the 5-year period with. We also had a number of good programs, and continuing those programs to help residents with home improvement loans, first-time home buyers. We had 2 housing projects that were underway by 2004, the Catella Cottages, which was just completed last year, the Sycamore Walk, and we're still doing remediation on part of that site, and the Century Triangle and Brookhurst Triangles were all key parcels and projects that we focused on a couple of years ago. We had a setback with the economy and the residential development sector turning sideways, so those unfortunately had to be shelved, but nonetheless the staff has gone out again and fine-tuning those projects, so we now have 2 potential developers in the early stages of both those developments. As we look to the midterm review, we've added a number of projects which I think have been very good for the city and shows the forethought of the agency over the last couple of years. The Embassy Suite and the expansion program has been approved. Boise Cascade again opened mid-2004, late 2004 with their expansion program. We approved a housing project on the Grove Street project downtown. But not only, again, do we concentrate on large projects, but the Westlake was 2 single-family parcels that were remnant after street windings that we're able to go forward with and get those developed. We have 2 mixed-use projects on our board. One of the key projects at the Central Hub, where McQuinney Enterprises has been awarded the negotiation agreement for close to 1,200 room hotel, as well as 200 plus or minus 1,000 square feet of entertainment retail. Sweet Home Development is a rather new one that's coming online that may or may not include a mixed-use component, but those are some that have been added to our work program. We also have a number of programs that we started in 2005, and you can see them listed there, and that has been an effort on the part of the staff, the mayor, the city council, and the agency to help the existing businesses in this community with a number of programs to help expand and to grow their businesses. One of the programs that I think we should take note of is the Housing Study, which was recently completed, and that's a economic development strategy that will be incorporated into the general plan that will be soon to be adopted, and that will be the blueprint for economic and redevelopment activities in the short-term years to come. There is no financial impact as a result of approving this report. It is simply a report of the projects and programs, and it does fulfill our community vision to improve the city's economic base. The agency may desire to make any comments or questions and allow public input on the plan, and with that, the staff would recommend that the midterm report and the accompanying resolution be approved. That concludes the staff report.
Oh, thank you very much, Chet. At this time, let's go ahead and open up the public hearing. If we have any questions for staff, we can hold off until after the public hearing. Does anybody like to speak on this issue? We will open the public hearing now. Hearing none, at this time, we will close the Mr. Mitchell, please come to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, and council members. The redevelopment plan is very well thought out, but the one thing that really concerns me is how much effort is being put into our industrial area on the west side. We have a lot of buildings there, a lot of vacant businesses. Now, I've always been of an opinion that taxpayers' money should not be given away easily. However, I think there may be some incentives that we need to come up with that are going to encourage some industries to come into that area, because one of the things that we need more of in Garden Grove is jobs. And I just wonder what plans are in the works to bring more business into our industrial area. Thank you.
Anybody else like to address the agency? At this time, we will close the public hearing. Comments, gentlemen?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment just in response to Mr. Industrial District. And, yeah, that is, it's not being ignored, I can tell you that. You know, even in the last several months, I've had a number of meetings going on.
I've had a number of meetings with staff and even with outside people, developers, consultants, whatnot, talking about that industrial district. We've had a problem there because back years ago we used to have a very strong sort of defense and aerospace type of industry, heavy industry that was located back in there. A lot of that has gone away, and a lot of the backfill in that industrial district has been kind of lesser productive uses for the city. I mean, warehousing space and things where you have a big space with one or two employees only, and you know, kind of a no real incentive to keep the place up very nice. So we've had some blight that's occurred. We've got some places that certainly there would be a lot better uses that we'd like to see there, but by attrition they've been kind of rolling over into lesser desirable uses. And a lot of those things, there's not much we can do to stop people from coming in and using those spaces if they're within the zoning there. So to be proactive, as part of our general plan update, I know staff has gone through and looked at that area, designated at least certain places to not to restrict what could be done with the use of those spaces, but to actually add an overlay that would allow more creative use of those spaces, try and attract biotech, biomed, life sciences, kind of cutting edge stuff. So we get not only jobs, but PhD jobs and engineer jobs and the kind of higher paying jobs that help increase the demographics of the city, help bring in retailers like Trader Joe's that everybody wants, and do all those sort of things. So there's a whole lot of thought that goes into that, and I know we are working on it. It's just it's tough, because how do you incentivize those companies to come in, and that's the hard part.
I'd like to comment on that also, Mr. Mitchell. I mean, basically, a lot of people think that Costco and maybe Home Depot are the largest sales tax generators in the city of Garden Grove. But the truth of the matter is, it's a company out on the west side, exactly in that center that you were talking about, called Boise Cascade. And about 12 years ago, the city of Garden Grove, through the redevelopment agency, negotiated with Boise Cascade to come to Southern California. We had to actually get into a competition with the city of Monterey Park. They had picked a location there and picked a location here, and they let both cities know which one's going to give them the best deal. The minute we cut a deal with Boise Cascade for about 50% on the sales tax, but the minute we did that, they became the largest sales tax generator for the city of Garden Grove and have maintained that status. Recently, they merged or bought out Office Depot, and their facility here was no longer adequate to do that. Montgomery Ward's had gone out of business here, and they were looking at a Montgomery Ward building. And again, we had to negotiate between Garden Grove and Buena Park this time to keep them here. Today, they are twice as large, the generator of sales tax. Anything sold in Southern California through Boise Cascade or Office Depot from the warehouse is the point of sale in Garden Grove. And I think the agency's been involved out there in that area for a long time. It does me good to see a property go vacant or up for sale. I like seeing them go up for sale, because that increases the property tax. That increases the what's going to generate for us out there. And that's happening. That constant turnover is happening. That's a good thing for us. It's not a bad thing. So I really think that what is known as the Irvine district has been a major asset. And the council that, Barney Adams and Tillman Williams, Woody Butterfield, that were on council that made that happen 30 years ago, they had lots of foresight. And it's doing well, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. We had the Husing study presented to us at our last council meeting in a study session, and we ran out of time. We didn't get to ask any questions about it or discuss it at all. But there was one thing that jumped out at me that I think is pertinent to this midterm review. He presented the census figures from the 2000 census, and then he had an update for 2007. And in 2000, our population was divided roughly equally, 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 Asian, 1/3 everything else. In the 2007 update, our population had jumped by about 5,000 people. Hispanics had jumped from 33% to 47%. Asians had actually gone down from 33% to 28%, and the rest was everything else. Caucasians went down from 28% to 21% of our city. And that was near the front of the report. And then near the end of the report, when he's talking about strategies, what he suggested was that we do focus on the Asian community and look for an Asian strategy, even though the Asian population had dropped by 5%. And I guess my question is, if you have a Hispanic population that jumped from 33% to 47%, shouldn't we be looking at a Hispanic strategy? I don't expect an answer tonight, but it's just something. Should we or shouldn't we, and why? We ought to give that some thought.
Any other questions for staff?
No.
Do we need a motion on this?
Yes.
Entertain a motion?
Move approval.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, let's go to items for consideration.
First item is purchase and sale agreement with Greg Ventures for the acquisition of real property located at 13082 Century Boulevard. This is a property located in the Century Triangle. And Carlos Marquez is here to give a staff report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, good evening. It is requested that the agency consider the acquisition of the real property located at 13082 Century Boulevard within the area commonly referred to as the Century Triangle. The property is owned by the developer, Greg Ventures, LLC. On November 13, 2006, the agency entered into a negotiating agreement with the developer for the mixed-use development of the Century Triangle site. In a good faith effort during the time, the developer acquired the subject property. The developer conducted a Phase 1 environmental site assessment and proceeded to demolish the multifamily residential structures located on the subject property. However, the developer allowed the negotiating agreement to expire in June 2007 and subsequently withdrew from participation in the Century Triangle project, citing significant declining market conditions. The negotiating agreement stipulates that the agency must begin negotiations in good faith for the acquisition of the subject property from developer within 270 days after the expiration of the negotiating agreement. An agreement has been reached with the developer to acquire fee title interest of 13082 Century Boulevard. The agreed upon purchase price of $615,357.19 includes only the developer's actual costs associated with the purchase and clearing of the property, such as environmental testing and abatement, as well as demolition of the existing structures. The purchase price of the subject property has been determined to be at fair market value by an independent appraiser. The acquisition of the subject property will be paid with housing set-aside funds, and the purchase of the property will improve the city's economic base through the development of tax-generating uses where appropriate. So at this time, staff recommends the following: to approve the acquisition of 13082 Century Boulevard, to authorize the agency director and secretary to execute the pertinent documents on behalf of the agency, authorize the finance director to draw a warrant in the amount of $615,000, $615,357.19, when appropriate to do so. Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, staff are available to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions for staff?
How large is the parcel?
77,700 square feet.
It's completely cleared now. It was
Correct.
demolished and cleared. Okay.
That is correct.
Any questions? Entertain a motion?
I'll move approval.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Let's go to 4B.
Mr. Chairman, 4B is a modification to a promissory note in relation to the Catella Cottages housing development, and Greg Brown is here to give a staff report on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fertel. Mr. Mayor and Chair Broadwater, agency city council members, you have before you this evening a request to approve.
We have an announcement here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm going to, I've abstained on this, is it abstain the correct word?
Actually, you're not participating in this one due to a potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to leave the room.
Apologize. You have before you this evening a request to approve a modification of the terms of sale of a promissory note approved originally on October 23, 2007, as was required by a disposition and development agreement between the agency and Brandywine Development Corporation that was originally approved in 2004. At the October 2007 meeting, the city and agency were presented with resolutions and other documents related to the proposed financing. The city and agency approved those documents, though a different investor was involved at the time. Market conditions and financial terms have changed since then, necessitating this action tonight. You will recall that the DDA was originally approved to eliminate blighting conditions and replace them with a 42-unit single-family residential development on a roughly 4.5-acre site located on the south side of Catella Avenue, just west of Gilbert Street. This development is complete, with the last housing unit being sold in April of 2007. A requirement of the DDA, Section 201.3, is that the agency make good faith efforts towards refinancing a portion of the promissory note via a tax-exempt refunding note. The source of repayment is limited to the site tax increment, and all issuance costs will be paid from the proceeds of the refunding note. The principal amount of the developer note will be reduced by the principal amount of the refunded note. The agency's obligation under the DDA does not change by virtue of these actions tonight. The developer will, however, realize less net proceeds from the transaction. Based on the foregoing, staff recommends the following. Acting as a City Council. Adopt the attached City Council resolution amending its 2007 resolution to incorporate the changes approved by the agency relative to the promissory note and related transactions. Acting as the Garden Grove Agency for Community Development. Adopt the attached agency resolution amending its resolution number 664, authorizing the execution of a note purchase agreement and promissory note to refinance an existing promissory note of the agency and approving certain actions in connection therewith. Authorize the agency director and secretary to execute all documents, including minor amendments, necessary to implement the agreement. In adopting these resolutions, the city and agency will also reapprove the following: a note purchase agreement and a 2008 promissory note, an implementation agreement, and revised developer note. As always, staff is available to answer any questions, and also present this evening is Kurt Yeager, agency counsel from Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Ralph, as well as agency financial advisor William Reynolds from Gardner, Underwood, and Bacon, and Mr. Terry Moss from Stone and Youngberg is also in attendance. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Mr. Yeager. Is this going to take 2 votes?
I'd leave that up to the city attorney. You can act on both resolutions at the same time.
Mr. Nixon?
If you're going to open jointly, I'd leave it to him.
You can do that. We just need to have both agencies in session at the time.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, will you open up the city?
The council is reconvened. But for the record, show that Councilman Jones is not here.
Any questions for staff? At this time, I entertain a motion.
You can say something? Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, this is covering both the council and the city. I mean, the council and the agency. Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Both resolutions, yes.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received 4 yes votes with Member Jones being absent.
Mr. Jones can come back now, wherever you are. Any matters from members of the agency? Hearing none at this time, we will close this up for 2 weeks.
Okay, we will recess the council for 5 minutes.